Welcome everyone, Dylan Gemelli here today with a brand new video for you. So, I have a good one for you today. I want to discuss with you how to properly use an aromatase inhibitor because it seems as though there's just a lot of confusion out there on when you should use it, why you should use it, if you should use it. I mean, everything under the sun, there's a different sort of advice being given by different types of people. And I guess it's fair to a point. Let me explain to you why I say that it's fair to have so many different opinions. One reason and one reason only, because everybody is different on their sensitivity to estrogen conversion. Just because that I'm sensitive to estrogen does not necessarily mean that you are. And just because that you're not sensitive to it doesn't mean that the next person is not extremely sensitive to it. Let me give you some examples here. I know guys that can literally, and I don't approve this dose of tests, so let me make that clear, but I know guys that can run 750 milligrams to a gram a test a week and barely need a light dose of Aromatase. Then I know guys that are on TRT at 100 to 125 milligrams per week, and they literally need to dose a full dose of Aromatase, not Aromatase, and they still have some sensitivity. So there is so many different responses to estrogen conversion out there, and every single person is going to be different. So let's say I give you a cycle plan layout, right? And I write in there 12.5 milligrams every other day of Aromatase because that's a general standard starting point for most people that are starting. That doesn't mean that it's set in stone that that's going to be your dose, okay? And the main reason that I specifically tell people that you need to do pre-cycle, mid-cycle, and post-cycle blood work is one of the main reasons is for this, to dial in your aromatase inhibitor dosing. Let me explain. Obviously, you need pre-cycle blood work to have a baseline, right? To see how you're responding to everything. Well, the mid-cycle is going to tell you exactly how you're responding to compounds, right? So if you're using tren, okay, and that's an extreme example, but you're using tren, you can see how it's affecting your cholesterol, how it's affecting your blood pressure, how it's affecting your prolactin and progesterone numbers. And you can also see with tests along with it how your estradiol and estrogen levels are. You have to check these so you can see how your body's responding to different doses and different compounds. Well, when you're starting out, chances are you really don't know how estrogen sensitive you are. How could you? Because you've never used any compounds. That's why you start with test only, because test does convert to estrogen. Not at a crazy rate, but it definitely converts to estrogen, and that's how you can really dial in your dosing. Then when you start adding other things like D-bol, for example, something that converts at an extremely high rate, you're going to have to adjust, right? But if you don't follow your blood work, you're just guessing, and you can't always go by the way you feel, because unfortunately a lot of times signs and symptoms of gynecomastia buildup won't even show or high estrogen levels. For some people they'll show immediately, and I've gone over the different types of side effects that you need to be aware of and the signs and symptoms, but ultimately sometimes you don't see anything at all, and that sucks, but that's just the facts. And so you have to tailor everything you do to be aware that, of these probabilities and possibilities. Now, like I said, everybody's different, okay? But there are starting points and averages that I can give you to start your dosing. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be enough, or that might mean that it's too much. Okay, some people even need to, and common other aromatase inhibitors. I mentioned Aromatase, I mentioned Aromatase. People will use Letro. That to me is only to be used in extreme cases. And it's something that you don't want to just start using for no reason. And some people will use Raloxifene. Some people will use Arimistane. I'm not a fan of it, but some people will use it, and it's okay for some people. It really is. And although I might not be a fan of it, doesn't mean it might not work. I just don't put it on par with other aromatase inhibitors. But some people, it's enough. It is. I'm going to give you basic doses for Arimidex and Aromatase because those are the two most widely used. Letro is completely different because it's tapered, and some people you only need just a little bit, and it's mostly used in an anti-gyno protocol in terms of you trying to reverse gynecomastia, not so much on cycle. But Arimidex dosing, generally you're going to start at 0.5 milligrams every other day. That depends on what you're using. okay? Because it might be lower than that, and it depends on how high you're running these compounds. If you're running test at 125 milligrams a week, chances are you don't even need it, but you wouldn't want to go at 0.5 milligrams every other day. That'd be too much for most people. You'd probably want to start at 0.25 milligrams every other day or even every 3 days at that dose to assess. But general starting on most normal average cycles is 0.5 milligrams every other day, and Aromatase would be 12.5 milligrams every other day. But like I said, these are basic starting points. They're not set in stone, and they must be adjusted as necessary, okay? I know sometimes that when people read things, they just think that's the end-all, be-all, and sometimes, you know, even myself, I don't make it perfectly clear that these need to be assessed and adjusted. So I want to make that clear. Now, I've made videos on whether or not you should start an aromatase inhibitor from the beginning of your cycle or wait till signs and symptoms show up. I don't believe in waiting for signs and symptoms to show up. Others have their own preference, and it's cool. I'm not going to argue with them, and they have their reasons, and that's fine. I'm more conservative, and some people are not. Okay, and some people say that an aromatase inhibitor can kill your gains, and that's true and false. It's not going to kill your gains if you don't crush your estrogen. It will kill your gains if you do abuse it and crush your estrogen or you don't understand how to work. So there's a yes and no side to that. So I'm not going to argue with guys like that because it is a fair point, but there's two sides to that story. That's from misuse on why that happens. There's a lot of benefits to running one, okay, especially Aromatase more so. Aromatase has some toxicity issues that can come up, and Aromatase is very beneficial in post-cycle therapy for preventing gynecomastia rebound as well as increasing IGF levels, which will, of course, help your recovery come along much faster. But, you have to have these dialed in properly, okay? There's always two sides to these stories, and you have to be careful with how you perceive what's being said or how you take what's said. So I'm trying to make sure I cover all my bases so people don't get confused here. So that is how to properly dose an aromatase inhibitor. That being said, stay tuned for plenty more to come. Dylan Gemelli signing off.